this lady on this mastermind, she said, I have this goal, but I truthfully don't even know what I would do with it. I think that's part of the problem, is that we set these big goals and we don't put ourselves in the situation.
Welcome to the Painter Growth Podcast, where we help you scale your painting company in record time. Join us as we explore sales, marketing, hiring, finances, leadership, and more, everything that you need to know to scale and grow your painting business. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. What is up, everybody? Mike Hickman here, a founder of paintergrowth.com, and you're listening to another episode of the Painter Growth Podcast. Hopefully another one. Hopefully you listen to them all. I know some people listen to them all, which is really cool, and thank you for doing that. And I'm joined here by a friend that I met years ago when I was living in Edmonton, Alberta, and we were working out together. And since then, we kind of bonded over the years over a shared love for entrepreneurship and personal development. And we're still connected. And I thought he would be a great person to come on and chat with you all today. So what's up, Kevin?
What's up, Mike?
How's that for an intro?
It's a wonderful intro. Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much. And I'll say that you're not just a pretty face. You've got a great mic voice as well.
It's a microphone. You buy the good equipment so that it sounds good.
Yeah, that's right, man.
So I guess just for the audience, just like tell me a bit about how you got your start in entrepreneurship and why entrepreneurship is such an important part of your life.
How long do you have? Good long story.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. Depends how interesting it is.
I'll keep it as short as I can. What got me interested in entrepreneurship started at a really, really young age. I think I was 12 at the time, and I asked my mom if I could get a job. She said, "Well, you're legally not allowed to get a job." And so at that time, I started mowing my parents' house's lawn, and my parents' lawn. And I said, "Well, can I just mow people's lawns?" And she said, "Sure." And so she's like, "Well, why don't you make up some flyers and go drop them off around the neighborhood, door to door, and see if somebody wants to hire you." And so I printed off. I was probably about 13 at this age, at this time, and I printed off 300 or 400 different flyers off of our printer, and just dropped them in people's mailboxes and knocked on a few doors. And that first summer I got 2 clients. Back then, and that's literally what started my entrepreneurial journey. And it was a desire to, as I reflect on it, it was a desire to make money that I could control. Of course, I got a job after that, 15 years old, became a busboy at my aunt's restaurant, and from there worked my way up in hospitality. It was early 2000s, so you were probably just born. I started my management and owner operator, you could say, status or journey in hospitality.
Okay.
And then got into digital entrepreneurship and digital marketing in 2007, when the world kind of fell apart. It started falling apart 2007, 2008, and hospitality wasn't thriving at that time, and my partnership crumbled, and ended up going actually filing personal bankruptcy at that time, and then started a new path. So long story short, entrepreneurship was throughout my life, both young, going through some challenge as an adult. It was always a solution that allowed me to march to the beat of my own drum. I'll put it that way.
It's so funny. I've talked to a lot of people, and myself included. I got my start in entrepreneurship when I was about the same age. Except it wasn't mowing lawns; it was shoveling driveways. So I think I was like 10 or 11 years old around that same time, and it was like there'd be a heavy snowfall, and I would go out with my shovel I would take from my parents' garage, and I'd come home a couple hours later with like $100. And like, there's no other way at this age that I could make this much money. So it just became a thing where I would just go shovel. And then I think I did some lawn mowing in the summer. But that entrepreneurial drive for those people who are true entrepreneurs, I mean, it manifests very early.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's a common trend, like yourself and Gary Vee.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to, the way that I want to kind of guide this discussion, just for people listening in, so don't drop off too early, because we look at those retention metrics. So you guys stick around here. because I think it's really going to be a valuable conversation. Kevin does a lot of posting and a lot of like personal work on like motivation and drive and staying motivated through all that. And it sounds like you had some times in your life where probably finding motivation was pretty challenging. So what was that like when you were, going through a personal bankruptcy and like looking at the future? Like, did that feel like the end of your career, or did it feel like an opportunity to start again?
More the latter. I think that time, because my identity was wrapped up as being here, being like one of the bar guys, one of the nightclub guys, and when we started my first journey into having a piece of a nightclub was 2001, but I started a partnership in 2004 with a couple of friends, and we all came from different organizations, but came together with a unified idea and vision that we could do something on our own and do something that was new and innovative and somewhat novel. And that was both one of the highs and lows of my career in hospitality, because we were able to develop some notoriety, but at the same time, we didn't know what we didn't know, and that the things that we didn't know were eventually became the end of our partnership and those businesses. So it was a great time, but it was also the greatest lesson for me, looking back at, yeah, it might have been very challenging at the time. I remember I was living downtown at the time. My sister and I bought a condo together, and I remember going through that time and having the blinds shut and the door shut, and all I wanted to do was sleep. I didn't want to. I'm not saying I had any, real bad thoughts, just that I didn't really want to face the world. I was being called by creditors all the time, nonstop, multiple times a day. And I really had a hard time. I had this avoidance behavior around it, right? Because I didn't want to face what became the result of some of the decisions that we as a partnership had made during that time. But looking back, it was a great time, because I've learned some of life's and business's biggest lessons through that challenging time and what came after it. And when you say how I went through it, I looked at it as an opportunity to start fresh. And I looked at, what can I do that gave me this kind of time freedom? Because for any of you that are your audience is listening, working in hospitality is kind of like getting paid to party. So I don't know if anybody has that shared experience, but
I worked in banquets for about 2 years, so it definitely can relate to
that. Yeah, you've got cash all the time, right? You've got money coming in, like you're not waiting 2 weeks to get paid.
You used to being up all night,
essentially. So there were a lot of perks to that, and I looked at, what can I do to still have this lifestyle and still have the opportunity, but with less headache, is the way that I looked at it. Back then, where our nightclubs were, there was a lot of regulation around the style of hospitality establishment you had. There was a lot of neighborhood and local pressure at that time, because there were so many licenses concentrated in one area that they were actively trying to shut places down. So that made it challenging. But again, the idea of turning a new page at that time was what I was seeking. And at the same time, that's when I really started to focus on personal development. I really focused on my own personal growth rather than just focusing on a business. And I think that that's what has helped build the foundation for what I do now, and some of the successes that I've had. And of course, I'm still learning, still have lessons. I'm sure, Mike, that you and your audience we all do, right? If we have an intention for deliberate growth, we're going to have lessons along the way, and that's the only way to have growth, is to go through those lessons.
Like we want to grow in a straight line, right? We think that, okay, I want to grow 50% year over year, but like in reality, growth is not a straight line. Like there are going to be setbacks along the way, and it's just like how you personally handle those setbacks. Like does it let you if you get hit back one notch, are you going to let it take you back 2 notches, or are you going to brush yourself off and, use that to be stronger than ever?
Yeah, exactly.
So as you're going through this very dark period, and you're getting all of these calls from these creditors, and sorry for pushing on this, but this is what the people are here for, this content. So
sorry, I'm
this is where the lessons are learned, right? So you're going through this dark period, and you're shades are drawn, you're in your house, you don't want to leave, you're in a dark spot, and you're getting all these calls from creditors. What made you realize that you can't live like this anymore? Something's got to change.
I would say, I've been an optimist for most of my life. I think I've been told that, and that's been reinforced through my childhood. I knew that there was a way out. I knew that there was, call it lighter or brighter days ahead. I just had to get through it, right? You feel like if you're in a challenge where your back is against the wall, and my back's been against the wall since that time as well, that I believe, and some people think it's cliche, but I believe where there is a will, there's a way. And I also look at success stories. That's something that fuels me, is that if I have an off day or I have a setback in my business, I do look at other things, external instances and events of other people succeeding. There's nothing that makes me different from somebody else. We're all made from blood, sweat, and tears. We're all human beings. We may have different circumstances. We may have different upbringings, but the one thing that we all have is the power of choice. And that power of choice allows us to dictate what our next actions might be. And so for me, it was getting my feet back on the ground, getting some financial stability through that, through post filing, my bankruptcy, and clearing that up, and then be able to take the next step into, what is the lifestyle I want to live. Back then, something that I revisit in my life all the time is Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I read that, and one of those principles is I think about it every day, and it's begin with the end in mind. So whether you're having a success or you're having a challenging time, or you've had call it a failure or a temporary defeat, what is the end that you're focused on? Don't just think, oh, I'm so stuck in this moment right now where I feel like crappy, or I feel anxious or depressed. It's, hey, how do I remove myself from this current circumstance? Circumstance is external. That has nothing to do with you. What is the outcome that I want to create? What is that end that I have in mind? And how do I reverse engineer that? How do I work backwards from that and look at the steps that are needed to get there?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to think about that end in mind for me, which was lifestyle. I've watched many of your testimonies, Mike, and it sounds like you've helped a lot of your clients focus on that, which is, they're making more money, but they also have more free time. That's amazing. I think that for most business owners is the key to real success. And when I say real success, it's not just monetary. Monetary is great, but if you're working 80 hours a week and you have no time to spend on the things or people that you love, then in my humble opinion, that's not real success, right? Mm-hmm. Freedom of choice is the real success. Money just helps facilitate that. So, I would encourage your listeners and anybody that I speak to or consult, that the idea of success is not a trade-off for money. Money just helps to facilitate what that success might be. Be it time, be it experiences, being, let's say, relationships or causes. That's what I kept in mind at that time, and it helped me stay focused on the next steps because I saw the end goal.
And did it ever feel like the end goal was too far away, or how do you deal with that? Because a lot of time we can set goals for ourselves. Like if I set a goal is too big, say, I want to build a $10 million per year painting business or something, but you set that goal, you know, you don't even know what the first step needs to be. So do you have like a rule that you follow with like how big a goal you should set is, or is it just a way that you can break it down into like a time delineated fashion?
Mike, that's a very great question, and I'll allude to our pre-recording conversation is the why. Why do you want a $10 million a year business, right? Why do you want 10 million ARR? Maybe it's 50 million ARR, or maybe it's 1.5. Whatever that end goal is as a business owner, you kind of have to figure out like what would I do with that? What would I do with money? What would I do with the time? I think what most entrepreneurs and business owners may lack, and I literally had a mastermind about this last night. We have this person, and maybe some of the audience would feel the same way. You've got a great big goal. Maybe it's your BHAG, right? Your big, hairy, audacious goal. And it's to have 7 figures worth of cash flow or 7 figures in your bank account. And this lady on this mastermind, she said, you know, I have this goal, but I truthfully don't even know what I would do with it. I think that's part of the problem, is that we set these big goals and we don't put ourselves in the situation to have that abundance and have that prosperity. And subconsciously, we self-sabotage because we don't know what we would do with it. I think it's important to put yourself in that situation where, let's say you're generating 100 grand net profit. Okay, that's great. What the heck would I do with all that money? Where I think a lot of society in general, but business owners they feel lost when they have these big goals is because they don't normalize what that type of income will do for them. And it becomes this pedestal. And so when you put money on a pedestal, what does it do? You start doing things that you shouldn't do with it, right? Because you're putting it on a pedestal. And you're also, when you put it on that pedestal, you start to put yourself beneath it. So subconsciously, you've got to normalize it so you're on the same level. And you start to think, hey, 100 grand net profit every month that's going to my bank account, that should happen all the time. It's not obscure. It's not abnormal. It's not uncomfortable. It should just be what happens. And because we put it on a pedestal and we distance ourselves from it, that's why we don't accomplish it. That's why we know the things that we should do. And Mike, you would know this because you're a very fit guy, that, you know, the key to success is how to unlock success. It's not about knowing what to do. It's closing the knowing doing gap. Everybody knows what to do. It's just, do we actually do it, right? Do we actually execute on what we know we should do?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I was having actually a conversation with my coach earlier today about goals, because we're talking about our next year goals. And I even did a webinar also earlier today for clients about goal setting. And I realized that, like, you know, my own have business goals. I know how many customers I want to impact and how much revenue I want to make, how much profit I want to make. But my coach wasn't even asking me about that. He's like, what do you want your life to look like? Like, if you sell your business for this much, or if you know, are making this much a month, like consistently, like, what does that mean for you? What's important for Mike other than money? Like, what would you do with your time? Right. And so I kind of started listing out some of the things that I want to do. And it's like, do you really need to wait until then to start doing that? Right. What are the easy things that we can start doing within our business now to allow your lifestyle to shift to some of these quick wins, the things that you do want to do, but you just don't make time, you don't prioritize right now?
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a good coach.
Yeah, he's good. He's a pretty smart dude. So you kind of pulled yourself out of this, pulled yourself out of the situation. You realize, I need to start moving in the right direction, use this as a fresh start. What were some of, like, the things that you did to turn your situation around?
One of the first things I had to do, well, of course, I had to get myself some sort of stability. And sometimes that means taking, you know, for me, it meant taking a job. For some of your audience, it might mean taking a contract that might not be ideal, but it's providing some sort of stability in that income. You know, I think that too often entrepreneurs, we all wear rose-colored glasses, right? We all look at the lens through this very optimistic perspective, and sometimes we need to take those off and say, okay, what's the best way for me to move forward? Not because I believe that everything is just going to work out. It's, hey, how do I build that realistically makes the most sense so that you can move beyond that. For me, it was taking a job. For the painter growth audience, it might be taking a contract or a job that, again, doesn't fit their ICP or doesn't fit their ideal payment structure or comp or MRR, but it will help build for that next level of evolution in their business. So I was really focused on getting my feet under me. And I would say a very close second was I needed to change my environment. And that didn't mean moving. It was changing the stimulus around me. Who was I talking to? Who was an influence in my life? At that time, my influence was other hospitality people, other managers, business owners, and operators. And during that time, I didn't consciously know it, but as I look back, I had a feeling that I didn't want the lifestyle that path had taken me down. I didn't want to be the operator that was still in the bar 4 nights a week, or I didn't want to be the guy that was just in admin, because truthfully, I don't want to be just an admin person. And so I realized that there was a lot around that previous life that I had lived that I actually didn't want. So I had to change the environment that I was in. And another mentor that shared this with me, and I'll share it with you, sticks with me everywhere I go. Environment is always stronger than will. You could have the best willpower in the world. You could be a saint, but if you're put on an island full of thieves, you will adopt some of their actions. You'll adopt some of that philosophy because it's normalized. So by changing my environment, I was starting to get around people that were reading. They were invested in personal development. They were constantly looking to grow, regardless of what income level they were at. And so when I did that, that was not only something that helped me look forward and that I felt happy around. It was a positive environment, but it gave me the mechanism to start my own personal growth journey.
I mean, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're spending time with people who are making excuses, or they're on government assistance, or they're just, they're negative people, that's what you're going to be, regardless of if you want to be that person or not.
That's right.
Yeah. The other thought that just came, what was it? I just kind of lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. So, I know you're into fitness. I'm also into fitness. So a kind of like a fitness related analogy that I would put that when you say environment is always stronger than will, it's like, if I'm like trying to lean out for a little bit and I'm like on a nutrition plan, I'm like tracking macros, I'm using my Fitness Pal. I can be, if I was like living alone in like an apartment by myself, I would just have like chicken and sweet potatoes 3 meals a day, and I would be fine. And I would be like so lean. But if there's a pack of Oreos in the cupboard, like I will say no to those Oreos, 99 times in a row. But then that one time I'll open it, I'll be like, all right, let's do this. Right.
Yeah.
So like my will can be there, but eventually the environment, I'm going to succumb to the environment. Right? If you're working in a donut shop, like you can say no a million times. There's only so many times you can say no.
Yeah, and that's a slippery slope, right? And just to use that same analogy, it's if you got donuts or cookies or chips around you all the time, you'll eventually allow yourself to have one. You're like, I've been good. I'm going to have one. The next time, because everything works in cycles, our psychology works in cycles. The next time that urge or impulse comes around, like, I can have one. Yeah, it didn't hurt me last time. You have one. Then maybe you have 3 or 4. Maybe it takes a week. Maybe it takes 6 months. The next cycle that comes around, you're like, you know what? The last time I had 3 or 4, it didn't really hurt me. And you have a handful. And before you know it, it's that compound effect that 5 years later, you're having chips like 3 nights a week.
Or you're mainlining spoonfuls of peanut butter straight from the jar.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think that's a slippery slope where our standards are what are the most important part of our habits and our psyche when it comes to creating success, whether it's physically or in a relationship or in your business. What are those standards? It's the thought where, how you do anything is how you do everything. That saying. Now, again, cliche, but very valid in this situation and many situations. So, do you allow yourself to slip? Do you allow yourself the leniency to do those things without guidance, without rules? And I know people like Alex Ramosi, he doesn't like rules, but and I'm sure you listen to him. I listen to him sometimes as well. But the idea that you can allow yourself to reward yourself, but it's a reward for something you've done, not something that, well, I just feel like it. If you feel like going shopping for a new outfit or new shoes or a watch or something because you can, that is very different than you saying, hey, I just had my best week of the year. I'm going to reward myself with that thing that I wanted 6 months ago, but you delayed that gratification till you actually earned it. Not, oh, I'm making more money than I've ever had before, so I'm going to go treat myself. Another slippery slope, just like the cookies, the Oreos, and the chips. And then a lot of people will have have had financial success because they're so lenient on these types of financial habits. They're like, oh, I've got this money. It's coming in. It's okay for me to treat myself. It's okay to treat so-and-so or my wife. Then before you know it, because of that lack of responsibility and accountability, they're now earning less because they're spending more. And they start to take, and I've seen this many times in my career where they reach a high, but then they quickly fall or steadily fall. And it's because they changed their habits that got them to the top.
Yeah, and that's the story of the professional athlete.
Yeah.
Right. They work their asses off to get to that professional league. They get to the league, they start making money, and all of a sudden it's time to spend.
Yeah.
Time to forget the habits that they were doing, how much they were practicing that got them to that high.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what were some of the most, like, what do you believe are like some of the most, maybe your top 2 most transformational books when it comes to that you read that helped you kind of work through those dark times?
I wasn't as much of a reader back then. I did start reading. That was the beginning of my journey. So Think and Grow Rich was right at the top there. It was introduced to me early on. And I think what facilitated my journey was before that happened, about 10 years prior to that. It was my cousin who was in a direct selling financial opportunity, and he gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it really gave me perspective on the mindset around money and success, and the contrast of what most average ordinary people think about, and then who most of us aspire for, which is wealthy, abundant, and prosperous, personas. So I think those 2 books were foundational in the beginning part of my journey.
So did you I said it really quick. The first one was Think and Grow Rich. That's Napoleon Hill.
Yep.
And then Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that was
Robert Kiyosaki.
Robert Kiyosaki. That's quoted often on this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Two great reads. Fundamental for anyone who's in business who wants to eventually create a nest egg for their family.
Yeah. I would say definitely one that I encourage everybody to read is The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek.
Okay. What's the premise of that one?
The premise is, so for those that may not know him, Simon Sinek he's a business and leadership guru or expert. He's blown up on social media. He's got one of the most watched TED Talks of all time. And it's the concept of start with why. And so he has a book called Start With Why. It was many years later that he wrote The Infinite Game. And there's a lot of overlap with start with why, because you have to know why you're doing something. But the infinite game is the concept of not thinking that there's a finish line, and that some of the best organizations, the best companies, the most successful people, they don't have a finish line. Their goal is to just continue playing the game. That's why they continue to evolve. That's why they continue to innovate. That's why they continue to create. And that's how they stay at the top of the game, because the competition says, oh, we're going to create this, the most badass app or widget in the world for painters or for SaaS companies or whatever. And because that's their end goal, well, competition, it will always flood every market. And when you have an end goal and you have that finish line, you may be first there, but everybody else is going to follow. And if you don't continue to level up your game, well, then you're just going to fall into the average, because everybody's going to rise up to where you were.
Mm-hmm.
So the infinite game is very, very enlightening, and he writes really well about it, about the idea that our goal should not be to hit $1 million. Our goal should not be to have a certain amount of ARR. Those could be milestones, but the end goal is, how do I stay at the top of my game in my industry with my niche? Like, how do I keep playing? That's the overall premise.
Yeah, I have a similar saying. Like, when you have those milestone goals in your business, like I want to get first, it's like I want to get to 10K a month, and it's like I want to get to 50K a month, and I want to get to 100K a month. And I've kind of coined it as the top of the mountain is a mirage. Right? Because you're going to get to the top of the mountain, you're going to realize you're just at the bottom again. The goalposts move, you change your perspective because you hit all these things. I always thought that getting to 100,000 a month was like my life was going to be complete when I do $100,000 a month. Then you hit it, and it's like, well, that was very anticlimactic. Because now there's
levels to this game, right? There's some people who don't get out of bed for $100,000.
Absolutely.
Ever, right?
And then I look at like, okay, there's like a $10 million business, and like to be a $10 million business, you wouldn't even get like batted an eye at with some private equity. We'd be like, oh, this is still called like, what do you call it? Like middle market, like low to middle market. Mm-hmm. Still nothing. You can't even get listed on the public stock exchange unless you're like hundreds of millions. So it's like, there's so many levels of this game, and to try to set those as end goals is just, it's such a fool's errand, because you're just going to get let down when you actually do accomplish it. I think framing it like a milestone is a good idea, but definitely can't be the end goal.
Also know why. I'll loop back around to what we were speaking about earlier. Why would you want that, right? And I'm not posing this at you, Mike, but whatever somebody's goal is, it's great to have big numbers. Is it for bragging rights, or is there something purposeful? Is there something fulfilling about that milestone or for that end goal? For me, with where my business is at, I don't have aspirations of a certain amount of ARR. And it's mostly because my biggest value, and everybody's values are different, so I'm not saying that this should be your value or their audience value, but my biggest value is lifestyle. So anybody here can go create a $1 million a year or $10 million a year business, but those outcomes will require some sort of sacrifice, whether it's you working your butt off, or you hire a team and you build up a team, and you've got to hire, you've got to fire, you've got HR, you've got all these moving parts.
Or capital, access to capital.
Right? Yeah, for sure. Right? Like what is the why that you have that necessitates the end goal of $1 million or 10 million or 100 million?
Mm-hmm. So on that note, actually, very relevant topic for you. About 1.5 years ago, your life changed.
Yeah.
So you became a father. What happened to your why after that happened? That first time that you held is a baby boy, right?
Baby girl.
Baby girl. Okay. Yeah. Team girl dad. What changed with your perspective and your why at that time?
My priorities likely shifted. My why is always, I'd say, has stayed pretty consistent because my highest value has always been lifestyle for myself and my wife, where we've both been able to work from home since 2010. We, for the most part, have a lot of freedom in our days, and the ability to share time and share experiences with our loved ones, being her family, my family, obviously close friends. That didn't necessarily change with my daughter coming, but the priority of making her part of that, that's what changed, right? So my schedule changed. Obviously, my priorities, my daily priorities, like my daily method of operation, my DMO, that's changed because now, one of the first things I do is I go and I hang out with her. And up until recently, I was feeding her formula first thing in the morning. And then my wife could get a little extra rest and we could carry on with our days. So that would be the change. The why has not changed. For me, I think the why has gotten stronger in that, and not because it was weak before, but now I want those experiences for her, right? I want her to be able to, have mom and dad both be field trip parents, let's say, that's the case, or for us to be able to pick her up from school, drive her to school without having to rush to work or having to, let's say, rush out the door, and of course she's not school age yet, but I would say those are the changes that have had for us since we had Delilah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with a lot of that, what you said. One thing that I find is that I struggle with is I have the time to be with them, but a lot of the time I'm not as present as I'd like to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Checking my phone, checking email, thinking about, challenging the business. So something that I could aspire to be better to is not necessarily the time, because we spend a lot of time together, but being more present when I'm actually with them. Because I think that they probably see that, right? They feel that I'm not truly there with them.
Yeah. And I think that's the curse of every successful entrepreneur. In order to create success, you have to make sacrifices. And I'm not saying you're sacrificing all the time with your family, but I think the people that get to those levels of success, and your level of success, Mike, is that we are obsessive about our businesses. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just one of the prices we pay, or maybe it just comes naturally in order to achieve that level of success. I personally don't believe there's anything wrong with having that type of obsession, but it's also knowing when to dial it back, right? So if it's 24/7 obsessiveness, again, as long as you can manage that, I don't think that's a bad thing. But if you sacrifice everything, that's the same thing as working 80 to 100-hour weeks, is that you're sacrificing everything in order to achieve the success. And that success, it's arguable who that benefits besides you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd look at your success as, who else can I benefit here? Of course, there's clients, there's which people in your life does this benefit? And I would encourage everybody that is doing goal setting. You mentioned goal setting earlier, Mike. Heading this next year, add on to your goals for your business, or what are some of the other goals that make you just a great person? If that's fitness, if that's relationships, if that's religion and spirituality, if it's financial success, what else can you also be great in? Because I don't know anybody, and I'm going to reference a cliche again, but I don't know anybody that's on their deathbed that thinks, man, I wish I would have built my business 2x bigger.
I wish I would have spent more time working.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Nobody says that.
Yeah.
So enjoy the journey, have those big goals. And I personally believe that you can be great at many things at once, but it requires an extra level of focus and dedication and being really structured. That was something I struggle with, because I'm a pretty, I'm lazy by nature. And so I've got to put systems in place. Like, my calendar is, if it's not on my calendar, I will forget. I know that. So exactly. I have lists, I have reminders, my phone's always dinging, but I also know when to turn it off. It's on do not disturb from 9 p.m. until 9 a.m. Do not disturb. It's just off. So putting boundaries in place and again standards, I think will help business owners have more fulfillment because it truthfully isn't about the money. And I think it goes back to my hospitality experience. I sacrificed weekends, sacrificed evenings. I sacrificed a lot of my life so that we could make those businesses a success. And after all of that crumbled, I realized that some of the sacrifices that I made weren't actually worth it. It wouldn't have moved the needle. If I didn't work one weekend, I just decided to spend it with the family, that wasn't going to be the end of the world. It wasn't going to be the end of the business. So there's a dichotomy, I think, is what I'm trying to say. And you got to find where your place is along that spectrum so that you can both achieve and strive for greatness in your business, but still have fulfillment in other areas of your life.
I think that it's also important that if you want to, I think you said aspire to be great at something else other than business, whether it's fitness. I'll just use that as the example. If you're currently out of shape and you want to get in shape, the first time you go to the gym or the first time you go for a run, you are not going to be great at it, right? It's going to be painful. And what is it? You got to do something like 60 days in a row for it to be a habit or something like that. Like if you can brute force yourself to go for a 1 mile jog every morning for 60 days, like you're going to be a completely different person after those 2 months.
Yeah. I think that, and speaking about that, I think that as we go into the year, most people have some sort of health or fitness goal. Figure out what can be sustainable in your life, and also know that this is a debatable belief, and there's definitely a lot of discussion around it. But the idea that if you are in shape as a male or female, you're respected more in the business arena, and it's part of that first impression. And I think that everybody should be focused on your health and fitness more, because again, that sacrifice for business, it's not worth your health. And give an example. I've got a friend who's also a mentor of mine, and he's worth 9 figures, exited multiple companies, he's a VC. He's got health problems, right? And he's only 60 something. And he said it himself. He said, it doesn't matter how much money you have. When something happens to your health, you feel helpless. And so you are coaching and mentoring a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs. I would say that make sure you don't make one of those sacrifices for your business success and financial success your health, because it can be, life is short and it can be taken away far too early if you don't even if you do care for it, it can be taken too early. But you're minimizing your chances of having something abrupt happen in your life that no matter how much money you have in your bank account, you can't solve it.
Yeah. When we get faced with our own mortality, our day-to-day problems become a lot less important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is for sure. Especially now having a kid, I've reflected more on mortality and time than I've ever had in my life.
It's crazy the impact that a little bundle of meat and bones can have on your outlook.
Yeah, totally.
Well, man, I think that's a great place to call for today. That was awesome. I got a whole page and a half of notes here. I'm inspired now. I'm gonna go hang out with my family now.
Hey, Mike, I'll say this, man. You are an inspiring guy. I love that we've reconnected, and man, I'm so happy for you and the success that you've created and the impact that you're having with other people. It's truly awesome and amazing.
We appreciate you being here, man. I hope that people listening in got as much value from this as I did. So appreciate you, man, and be in touch.
Okay, take care. Thank you, everybody.
Kevin. Thanks for listening to the Painter Growth Podcast. If you want to grow your painting business, go to www.paintergrowth.com or click on the top link in the description. Talk soon.